Everyone, welcome back to the workshop, and today we are going to take a look at the F1 Ultra. This is a 20 watt diode and fiber laser from xTool. We're going to see what it can do, and we'll do some comparisons to the original F1 as well. So if you're interested in this, want to find out my thoughts on it, stay tuned. I'm going to jump right into it. All right, so this video is primarily going to be about the F1 Ultra, but I know a lot of people want to know what are the differences between the original F1 and the Ultra. So I'm going to touch a little bit on them, but we're going to jump in more to what this can do, and then I'll give you some of my thoughts between these two and what situations might work best for each one. So first off, the size. There is a huge size difference between these two, easily twice the size of the original F1, which is going to have a little bit of an impact on portability. You know, that was one of the things I've loved about this original F1 is it's easy to grab and go, take to events, and you can engrave both on metals and acrylics as well as natural materials, woods and such. So it does give you a really good opportunity to be able to take a small portable laser to events and be able to engrave on site. It's not to say you can't do that with this one, but it's not made with so much as portability in mind. Yes, you could still take it around, but we'll talk into whether I think that's a good idea later. So bigger size, and with that comes a bigger working area. So you have a 220 by 220 base working area on this one, whereas the original F1 just has a working area of 115 by 115. So not quite double, but a lot, getting close to that, where you have a lot more working area in this one. The original F1 was a 10 watt blue diode and a 2 watt IR, and this one is actually a 20 watt blue diode and 20 watt fiber laser. And so definitely more power, double the blue diode, but 10 times the power of the IR, the fiber laser. So they're going to be able to do similar things, but when it comes to what this can do that can't, you're going to be talking about deeper engraves on stone, deeper engraves on metal. It's a faster speed. The original F1 had a top speed of 4,000 millimeters a second, whereas this one is at 10,000 millimeters a second. So combining that with the extra power, it definitely should see speed increases, and it's going to be able to up your production times on things. Portability, going back to the weight, we're looking at the original F1 comes in about 4.6 kilograms, or right around 10 pounds, whereas the F1 Ultra, you're looking at about 14.7 kilograms and close to 32 pounds. So again, when it comes to portability, this one much easier to grab and go. This one, you're going to want to be able to have both hands on and move it around. Both are compatible with XCS and Lightburn, but then the big determining factor for some people, your cost. The original F1, average retail price for this is about $1,500, whereas the F1 Ultra is up closer to $3,900. All right, so let's talk about some of the additional features on the F1 Ultra. One that you might see right away is this offline control panel. This is a nice add-on. It connects into the back of the laser and gives you some basic functionality. You can use the buttons to raise and lower to do a manual focus. You can start a framing job, as well as this big button down at the bottom will start a job. You can also load offline files in. It does have a USB port on the side here. You can browse to that and select jobs and run right there, or you can restart the last project. So with that, of course, as was on the original F1, it does have this shroud that slides up and down. This is a nice safety feature. It keeps all your smoke, debris, and your light radiation contained, and does enclose it all. I do find that it is a little more flexible than the original one just due to the size, and you sometimes have to be careful to make sure that it really fully seats down, just to make sure there's no leakage on the back. But other than that, it is nice to have this laser fully enclosed, even if you raise and lower the focus. Some of the others that you see will have a cone, and that cone raises up and lowers with the laser, and that creates a gap at the bottom. So nice to see that as well. With this, you can slide it up, and you have a nice working panel here. They do have lines along the front here, and those allow you to align accessories such as the RA2, which this is compatible with, and so you will just line them up there. It's nice to have that visual guide. You don't necessarily need to have some sort of external jig to get this in alignment. And then they do offer a cable to make the RA2 Pro work with this. And again, that's one of the functions that plugs into the side here. Now, when you are using that, you won't be able to lower this shroud all the way down, so you do lose a little bit of that safety feature. So if that's the case, you do want to make sure you invest in a good set of glasses based on the wavelength of which style you're going to be using on this laser. An additional tool that they provide is a cutting panel, so that's nice metal panel with these raised slats. You can set this in here, and if you are doing cutting, you want to have these slats kind of going front and back, because that will also allow the exhaust panel in the back to more easily vent those fumes. And so nice that it'll fit in there. It doesn't key in any way. It doesn't create any alignment jigs, but just elevates your material to keep it off that base panel, allows you to cut more effectively. And along with that, they do have a nice grid of 4mm screws in there, and so they provide you with one of these corner jigs. You can just bolt that in to the laser, tighten those thumb screws down, and then you can slide in objects to kind of have your alignment real quick. So if you're doing kind of a repetitive project where you're doing multiples or maybe a series of them, you can use that to get your first one aligned and then just keep burning through them. Taking a closer look at the side and the back of the laser, along the side here we do have a number of these connection ports. So like I mentioned earlier, we have the USB port. You can load in files for offline operation. You have your power on off button, and then you have two accessory ports. So this is for adding things such as the RA2 and as well as the rotor or the conveyor. And then we have our normal USB-C port for connecting directly to the computer. And up top here, a safety feature I like seeing on all lasers is an emergency stop button. You push it in, that will kill power to the machine and the lasers, and then you rotate it to restart the laser and power it back on. Along the back side here, we have kind of this aviation style plug. This goes to your offline controller. So that's got a good, about a 3-foot length on the cable, so you can have some distance on that. And then you'll see some more accessory cables for a foot pedal, as well as the air filtration unit, as well as a fire safety sensor. So you can put your fire suppression system in here, hook it up to this controller, and then over on the side here is where you would plug in the hose for the CO2 gases that would come in there to flood that and try to douse the fire. Then finally, we have a USB key. You can plug this in, and that will allow your laser to be used. If you remove it, it's kind of like a hard key. It won't allow the laser to be turned on. And then, of course, our power plug. And then you see on the back here, we have our vent panel. This is, there's a fan in there, powers that out, or you can hook it up to the air purifier units, and we'll both blow that into there, and then those will pull air out as well. So now another big feature upgrade on the F1 Ultra is they do have an LED light bar for illuminating things in here, but most of all, they have a 16 megapixel camera kind of at the back to be able to view the working area, and this is tied in with their XCS software to allow you to get a preview of the working area, as well as once you do a calibration process on it, it will help you to automatically align objects. This is supposed to work with their batch feature that you can just put a number of similar items down, drop in your logo or your text or your design on one of them, and then have AI kind of go in and identify all the areas and drop them in place. We put our cutting panel in place. I cut a piece of Baltic birch down and used the material test generator within xTool Creative Space to run some tests. Now on this, I like to run it a few times because you never know when you're going to be running into abnormalities in the material, or perhaps sometimes the laser just needs to warm up a little bit. So I like to run it a few times, and on this sheet, I did run it 4 different times. And as you can see here, we ran it from 6 millimeters a second on up to 10, and from 60 to 100% power. And here is our results. So you don't want to necessarily compare this apples to apples with a gantry style diode laser of 20 watt power. Because this is a galvo style laser, it has a couple of mirrors that are bouncing the beam around. And so you get two things. You have kind of a longer focal distance, and you have no air assist with that. It also is going to angle the beam a little bit as you get further away from that center. So that's going to have a little bit of effect on the cut quality. My best results, I just squeaked out 7 millimeters a second at 100% power, but consistently it was cutting through at 90 to 100% at 6 millimeters a second. So that consistency kind of showed me where we were landing with this, gives me a ballpark for this material. Any material you're going to work with, try to get some extra, run a few of these cut tests, and you will see how that works out for you. Now, one thing I was noticing is I am getting some of that charring on some of those squares. So I ran the test on 2 larger squares and ran this one at 5 millimeters a second, 100% power, a single pass. Now it did cut through, but I was seeing some flame following the cut, and that was creating a little bit of extra scoring. So what I ended up doing was taking this square, ran it at 12 millimeters a second, 2 passes, which is actually faster than this one. And it really cut down on those flare-ups of the flames. Still have a little bit of a scoring there, and that's going to be due to the fact that you can't really have an air assist with this. But speeding it up cut down on the amount of charring and the amount of flame that I was seeing in there. So 2 things you're going to be worried about. So realistically, you'd want to play around with your speed and passes. You could even add a 3rd pass and really speed it up. That might help cut down on the charring, cut down on the flames, and it could overall be faster, because if you're moving it faster but making more passes, you can kind of make up for that lack of power from the duration with speed. So play around with it a little bit, find your sweet spot, and you'll be able to do some cutting. But that really isn't this machine's forte. It's really more of an engraving machine. You can cut, as you can see here, but if you're doing a lot of cutting, you're probably going to be wanting to look at either the CO2 P2 or the Diode S1 machines for your purposes. So let's take a look at engraving. So again, with engraving, we want to do a material speed test. This is the same material, Baltic birch plywood. Started out with it going from 400 to 800 millimeters a second and 30 to 90% power. Kind of gives us a good gradient, but I wasn't getting a whole lot of depth, and that might be something you're looking for with this machine. So I went ahead and ran it again and started down at 100 millimeters a second, went up to 400 millimeters a second, and there we were getting a much deeper burn, but you also start seeing kind of some of that overburn, that residue being left there. So this would be something you want to look at if you're needing a depth engrave. You just need to know that you're probably going to get a little bit of this extra charring, that you're going to need to be able to sand off or whatnot, but you can get a nice deeper engrave. And then looking at the color gradients, you can kind of judge off that. For vector engravings, where do you want to land with this? Looking at this, I'm probably going to be in that 400 millimeters a second speed range, and I get a pretty decent gradient from light to dark. So if I'm doing multicolor things, that'll give me some options. So let's try it out with some other engravings. All right, so I ran a number of other items in the engravings, and I'm going to try to share with you the settings I use, but in a lot of cases, I use the feature within XCS that they have their easy set panel. They have a lot of materials that they've pre-tested, and they have kind of a grid or recommended settings that you can use. So it's always something that's nice to look at, get a ballpark, and it may work out well for you. You might want to tweak them from there, but I will try to reference all of the settings that we used on each one. But let's dive into that. All right, so one thing that we've done on a lot of different items is these business cards. These are often anodized aluminum or a painted metal stainless steel card, and what you're doing is you're blasting away the coating or the anodization. And so these are very popular to do, and one of the nice things about this laser is that larger working area, you'd be able to set up multiples. But I ran just this single one. This is a business card file I've run on many other items before. This one, again, using the defaults for the black coated business card that they have in XCS, which that came out to be 70 power using the IR laser, 2,000 millimeters a second, 200 lines per centimeter, and 30 frequency. This file only took 41 seconds to complete. When I was running these on the normal F1, I know I was getting these in around 1:10, 1:15. So we're almost cutting that time in half. So there's one of the differences you can see on this is that the time to burn is going to be much faster. So of course that was just a vector engrave, but wanted to play around with more of a photographic one. So using similar cards, same kind of coated cards, went ahead and grabbed basically the selfie that I have on here. And again, these are using some of the defaults, but I believe I tweaked these a little bit. Where I ended up with this is using the fiber laser, 75 dot duration, 30 power, 500 DPI, 30 kilohertz frequency, and this ended up taking about 6 minutes. It is a highly detailed image, actually came out very well. I'll try to put a photo up on the screen of it and such, but so it does take longer than your typical vector engrave because it is changing that power and doing a much finer dot size and such. but really impressed with the quality of that photo on one of these business cards. Keeping along with that engraving, I went ahead and jumped over into AI for this one. Some people ask, how do we use AI? Well, in some cases, you just might need a theoretical image. And so I prompted AI to say, give me a man hiking in the woods with a ball cap, because as if you've watched some of my other videos, I enjoy hiking and camping. And so it would be a similar to me kind of thing, but AI's rendition of it. So with this one, we're using this on kind of like a scratch paper. So you can remove the coating on it. Went with the fiber laser, only a 90 dot duration on this because we need to go faster with this material. 30% power, 350 DPI using the Jarvis and 30 kilohertz frequency. This did take about 8 minutes to complete, but this is a little over 4 inches square. And again, you know, fairly good detail. If you really zoom in, you start seeing the pixelization, but pretty cool what we can do with photographs with these lasers. Another typical thing to do, of course, is slate coasters. So this is an image that I kind of made playing around with some of my outdoor adventure stuff. So just Ventari Outdoor Adventures. This is actually more of an image file. So we had to run this with dithering and Jarvis. Again, use the slate defaults within the XCS settings, which those ended up being the fiber laser, 180 dot duration, 90% power, 400 DPI, 30 kilohertz, and this took 1:12 to engrave. And again, that's due to the photo nature of this. If it was more of a vector and it's just burning at a set power, you can tend to go a little bit faster with these. But a minute per tile on these slate tiles, and granted, this is only kind of covering the middle half of it, is pretty good. I have actually used this machine to create a set of coasters for a friend with an Airbnb. I did a quick short on it, and there again, I was able to crank through those really quickly. So another fun thing that we tend to do is making just these little tags. And so xTool does have these available, these little bone dog tags. They're pet tags, great for making identifiers for your dogs and such. And these do tend to be a really good seller if you can customize them on the fly at markets. But again, using the XCS defaults for this one, ran it, the black aluminum tag setting comes out to be 70% power on the IR laser, 1800 millimeters a second, 200 lines per centimeter, and 30 frequency. This took a whopping 5 seconds to engrave the name and a simple number on there. So something that you could crank through quite a few of these, 5 seconds a piece after a file setup. You could have this out to the customer in a matter of a couple minutes from getting their information to pulling it off the laser. Customizing jewelry is a nice thing, and this, of course, is just stainless steel jewelry, but it's got a gold coating to it. And so I have a mixture of a Minnesota with a little bit of a home logo in there, but the whole thing spells out home. The letters are actually vector. So we ran this, we're using the XCS default settings. We're using the fiber IR laser, 70% power, 2000 millimeters a second, 200 lines per centimeter, 30 frequency. And this took a whopping 4 seconds to burn in there. So again, that power and speed upgrades in this laser, able to increase that production speed of the items. Now, of course, this is just a tiny piece of jewelry, but you know, for customized jewelry in your market, it might be something hot. If you can get a number of blanks, be able to do these really quickly for people, you can turn really quick profit. So along with just vector engravings, we can also do image engravings on stainless steel. And so I took a picture that I have of a dog I had a number of years ago. He's a Siberian Husky and really enjoyed having him, and put it onto this little pendant. But this is about a 1-inch diameter pendant, and using the software, brought in the image, masked around it, and got just his head in there really well. And then went ahead with the settings again in XCS. And what that ended up doing is running the blue diode laser on stainless steel for this one. We have a 770 dot duration. We have 100% power. We're running this at 320 DPI with Jarvis as the dithering, and this little pendant with his head on there. Only 13 seconds. Right, a lot of people with their mobile listening, they have, you know, maybe they have a set of AirPods. Well, xTool provided some generic AirPod containers to test. And of course, they have settings in their software for this. So I don't know 100% if it's exactly the same material as you would get from, you know, maybe your Apple products and such, but ran them. It ended up being 15% power on the IR laser, 900 millimeters a second, 240 lines per centimeter, and 30 kilohertz frequency. And this, again, only took about 15 seconds to burn that logo on there. Now, it's maybe a little more gray than it is black, but that is just straight off the plastic. Now, when doing plastic, you definitely kind of want to know what material it is, because certain plastics will give off some fumes that aren't going to be good for you or your laser. So try to confirm what type of plastic it is. You want to be staying away from anything with like vinyl in it, and that, because that releases some acidic gases that, again, they're harmful to your laser, they're harmful to you. So if you're unsure of what the material is, try to look it up and maybe find an alternate if you can't confirm what's in there, because you want to keep yourself safe and those around you as well. So I also talked about being able to hook up the RA2 to this. So we did, of course, drop that in there, and went ahead and ran a cup with my logo on there. So these are just some typical stainless steel tumblers. I actually think I picked these up at Harbor Freight a while ago when they had them on sale for about $5 a piece. They make great test material. And ran the default settings on here, which is using the IR laser, 60 power, 125 millimeters a second, 240 lines per centimeter, 30 frequency. Took about 6 minutes to rotate and do the whole logo, and it came out pretty well. It's maybe a little more gray than black than I'd like, but you know, that's kind of the nature of stainless steel. It's all slightly different, and depending on the thickness of it, and the actual type of stainless, you're going to have some different results in colors and shading. So if you absolutely need to have this black, you're going to want to look into using the marking spray. xTool sells some. There are some other brands out there, but on most stainless steels, you can get a pretty decent marking without adding anything to it. So of course, speaking of stainless steel, people are going to ask, hey, can you do color? And yes, you can. However, there's a lot of variables to take into this, because what you're doing is you're annealing the metal, you're bringing it up to a certain temperature that's changing that color. So the type of stainless steel, the temperature it happens to be sitting at, the thickness, and so how quickly it dissipates heat, they're all going to change your settings a bit. So you want to try to find a consistent product of or consistent blank that you're going to use to be able to use some settings. And of course, you're going to need to run some speed tests. And so I ran a couple different ones trying to dial in some colors. And one thing you'll notice here is these cards, they started warping on me. And again, that's going to have a change on the effectiveness, because it's going to change your focus. And as it's doing more of this work on here, it's heating up the card overall. So again, it's going to change your settings. So these thinner blanks are probably not ideal for this. You want to get a thicker piece of stainless that's going to dissipate the heat quickly, so that it's going to be more consistent throughout your whole image. But I don't know if I can get that to flash on here. Cameras are always a little tricky, but you do see some color gradation. You're getting some blues in here. You got some browns and reds and such, and then some more frosted ones. Tried to dial them in on this one as well, but as you can see, it was getting too hot, and on the back side there, we were starting to blow it out. But again, we have some nice blues in there that we can work with, and I think in some cases was even able to try to squeak out some yellows. But I thought, hey, let's give it a shot anyway. Let's see how it turns out. And I was able to kind of replicate the American flag here. So this is a vector image, and I did this in layers. So the stars are actually a white layer along with the stripes, along with the red and then the blue border. And it came out okay, but as you see, it was working top to bottom. It was starting to get hot and curling there. In some cases, the white up here was working good, but down there it was getting a little bit more darker, just because that material was heating up. So yes, it can do it. It's going to take some playing, and it's going to take some thicker material to be more consistent. And just know that it's probably something that you're going to spend a lot of time on blanks to really dial it in. And then you're going to need to be careful to make sure all of those variables stay constant, or you're going to start getting some variation in the colors that you're getting out there. But it is something fun to play around with. Now, one thing that we're not going to get too deep to in this video is deep engravings. And this is something that the F1 Ultra is going to be able to do that the F1 Standard can't. That's going to have to do with that higher power fiber laser versus just that lower power IR, 2 watt versus 20 watt. You have a lot more power with that, and you can adjust the frequency of the beam. And that's going to have an effect of, is it going to be lightly marking it versus more aggressively marking it in the passes. So I have played around with it a little bit, and here is an example in some aluminum bar stock. I took my logo, if I get it to focus there, and had it kind of do an embossing on there. And so you can kind of see that it is possible. I'm going to dive a little more into this using slate, using brass, maybe even some more aluminum. We'll take a look at its capabilities, but yes, it is possible. But this is going to be one of the things that it takes time. You're setting up a grayscale image. It has to do hundreds of passes to get the varying depths on 3D images and such. So this isn't something that you're going to go to, say, a craft fair and be able to crank them out. And so even when doing one-offs in your home shop, you're going to want to factor that time in. But we are going to take a look at that in another video for sure. So stay tuned if you want to find out more about that. And the other thing we will do a little more depth looking at is some of the capabilities of the camera. So I ran a bunch of these wooden nickels. These are 1 inch in diameter. And then I just kind of put an image of United States of America wooden nickel and put that out on there, tossed a bunch of these on the bed, put them on the cutting tray so there was a nice contrast between them, and ran the auto-generate, auto-fill item. And while it did drop them on each one of them, I'm going to try to show you 2 of these right here. So here you can see the difference between just these 2. The one is kind of up into the corner, the other one is down low. So while it can autofill, your results are going to vary a bit. Again, something I want to play a little bit more with. I think it's a cool feature. I love it when companies push the envelope, try new technologies, because that helps drive innovation across all companies. But you just got to, sometimes the first iteration needs a little bit of testing and developing to get to better and eventually best. And one more difference between the F1 Ultra and the original F1 is the air purification system that works with it. So they do have a desktop air purifier that works with the original F1, but in this case with the F1 Ultra, you do need the bigger unit. So they do provide you a hose. This kind of end will fit onto the back, and then this will stretch out and can go into the air unit there. So if you are looking for this, you can use this as an option. It does require filters that do need to be changed, and depending on what you're running, how dusty it is, how much particulate comes out of it, those filters are going to need to be changed more often than not. It does help cut down on the smoke and the smell. Doesn't always 100% eliminate it depending on what you are cutting and what you're engraving, but it can help in those scenarios where you don't have a way to vent it outside. So this is going to be important in the future as we start looking at deep engravings when you are getting a lot of particulate coming off of the material, whether it be metal coins, metal blanks, or things like slate and stone. That particulate comes off of there. It doesn't just disappear, becomes microparticles. And if you don't have this hooked up to anything, it's just going to come out into the air. So it's great to have something to trap it. You can also exhaust it outside, but also just be mindful that it is going out into the air out there as well. All right, so I've given you a good rundown of some of the tests I ran with the F1 Ultra. Hopefully you've maybe watched my other videos on the original F1. So what do I think between the 2 of them? Where are their usefulness? Well, if you are looking at something to take to a market and be able to do on-the-spot engraving, I think the F1 original is the way to go. It's more compact, easier to move around. It's going to take up less space on your table. And for 90% of the things you want to do on site, this is going to do it pretty quickly. You're not looking to take up your time there on doing deep, long engraves or cutting operations. You're going to be taking pre-made blanks, putting them into a jig, burning it out, and cranking those out as your customers are coming through. So I think from just the portability standpoint, if that is what you're going for, look at the F1 original. Now, if you're looking more for production, you're wanting to be able to do bigger jobs, get more things in, and cut your time down in the shop, F1 Ultra is definitely the way to go. I'm going to be looking more at those options in the future, both at the options they have from the conveyor belt to the auto fill options, to also looking at creating some jigs and fixtures to allow you to set up multiple items in this larger working area using that faster power, that faster speed to get work done faster. All right, so this is where I think I'm going to wrap up this video, the initial impressions on the F1 Ultra, a little bit of a comparison with the original F1. I hope you found it useful. I will have links down below if you're interested in this laser, want to learn more, and if you purchase it using those links, does tell xTool that you found my information useful, and I get a little bit of a kickback, which helps me out buying materials and items to do further testing on these. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be jumping in more to some of the details on this, so definitely stay tuned for that. But if you have questions or comments about this you want me to address in future videos, go ahead and leave a comment down below, and I'll do my best to include that or maybe even just answer it on the fly. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you found it informational, maybe even entertaining. If you did, hit that like button. If you're new here, consider subscribing, and we'll have more content coming at you in the future. Thank you for watching. I always appreciate you being here, but I hope you can get out in your workshop and make something too. We'll catch you next time.